Introduction. The Key of Solomon. The Lost Grimoire of the 1% and the Secrets of the Unseen. The Clavicula Salomonis is not merely a collection of ink and parchment, or a relic of a superstitious age, but a living, breathing frequency that has been systematically buried beneath the layers of mundane history and the noise of a society designed to keep the human spirit in a state of amnesia today. To open this record is to engage with the actual architecture of the unseen world, where the ancient King Solomon did not merely pray for wisdom, but mastered the technical science of dimensional command and the protocols of sovereign interaction with the celestial and terrestrial hierarchies. For centuries, the true key has been hidden in plain sight, masked by the distorted texts now. The distorted translations were made by those who feared that the 1% would remember their birthright and begin to rearrange the atoms of this reality according to the laws of divine will rather than the mandates of artificial matrix. As we begin this transmission, you must understand that the words contained herein are active, energetic codes designed for the soul today. These codes bypass the analytical mind and speak directly to the dormant centers of the soul, where the memory of your own godhood remains perfectly preserved. The silence of the desert, the shadows of the temple, and the precision of the celestial alignments are all gathered here in this singular moment of revelation as we peel back the skin of the simulation now. We reveal the golden machinery of the cosmos that responds only to the voice of the awakened sovereign. The story of the key begins long before the physical construction of the temple in Jerusalem, for it is a knowledge that was brought through the stars and anchored into the ley lines of the earth by the original architects of the human experiment for all today. They knew that a time would come when the veil would grow so thick that only a specific mathematical resonance could pierce it. Solomon was the first to successfully synthesize this star knowledge with the terrestrial elements of the earth, creating a system of spiritual technology that allowed him to bind the forces of entropy and command the spirits now. He commanded the spirits of the air and the deep to build a civilization that reflected the harmony of the spheres. This was not a magic of tricks or illusions, but a high-pressure application of a consciousness that recognized every spirit as a specific frequency and every ritual as a precise tuning of the internal radio to match that frequency in the world today. When the 1% of the ancient world utilized these keys, they were not asking for favors from a distant deity, but were operating as the conscious interface between the source and the manifestation, ensuring that the flow of light was never interrupted by the shadows of fear or the distortions of the lower ego. As the centuries passed, the masters realized the truth now. The masters of the shadow realized that the only way to control the population was to steal the key and replace it with a series of empty ceremonies and terrifying myths that made the average human feel like a victim of circumstance rather than a creator of destiny. They turned the science of Solomon into a dark legend of demons and jinns for the people today. They hoped that the average seeker would be too afraid to look behind the curtain of the ritual to see the raw power of the zero-point field that is waiting to be directed. But the resonance of the key cannot be destroyed, and it has survived through the bloodlines of the silent few who have waited for the planetary vibration to reach the critical mass now. We are now in that window of time where the science of mass ascension meets the ancient tech of Solomon, and the key is being handed back to those who have the courage to turn it in the lock of their own hearts. This introduction is the sound of the tumblers falling into place as the heavy doors of the unseen world begin to creak open once again for the soul today. The doors invite you to step into a reality where your word is the law and your presence is the light. To master the key of Solomon is to first master the internal geometry of the self, for the exterior temple can only be built if the interior temple is a perfect reflection of the celestial blueprint. You must strip away the layers of social conditioning now. You must remove the false identities of the 3D world and the lingering traces of the victim consciousness that have kept your signal weak and fragmented. The 1% understands that the key is not an object, but a state of being, a frequency of absolute certainty and total alignment with the unquacked logos that allows the spirit to command the matter with a thought today. This is the science of the miraculous, where the laws of physics are revealed to be nothing more than the habits of the collective mind, and where the one who remembers the original laws can rewrite the code of their own life in real time. As this history unfolds, you will feel the pressure of the ancient knowledge pressing against the boundaries of the mind now. The knowledge forces you to expand into the vastness of your own multidimensionality, where the spirits and the stars are no longer distant concepts, but active partners in your journey of sovereign manifestation. The echoes of the temple are calling to you across the ocean of time, reminding you that you were there when the foundations were first laid today. You carry the blueprint of the key within the very strands of your DNA. The return of the key of Solomon is the final sign that the quarantine is ending, and that the humanity of the new earth is ready to take the seat of authority that has been vacant for thousands of years. This is not a path for the weak or the curious, but for the warrior saints now. The path is for the philosopher kings who know that the power to manifest is also the responsibility to sustain the harmony of the whole. Let the noise of the old world fade into the background as the golden resonance of the key begins to vibrate in the marrow of your bones, and the light of the hidden sun begins to shine through your own eyes today. The story of the key is your story. The history of the 1% is your history, and the beyond matter. Reality is the kingdom that has been prepared for you since the beginning of the cycles. We are the keepers of the resonance. We are the holders of the key, and the door is now open for the final return to the radiant sovereignty of the one true Creator now. Chapter 1. The Architecture of the Sovereign Mind. The true foundation of the Key of Solomon does not rest upon the physical materials of the ancient world, but begins within the hidden corridors of the human consciousness, where the first spark of divine authority is either ignited or extinguished by the quality of one's own internal frequency. To understand the opening of the seal, one must first recognize the deep today. The reality we perceive through the 5 senses is a secondary reflection of a much deeper and more intricate geometric lattice that responds exclusively to the command of a focused observer who has attained a state of total internal coherence. In the ancient days, the initiates who sought the wisdom of Solomon were not taught to look outward for power, but were instructed to descend now. They descended into the silence of their own being to find the central point of the compass where the horizontal plane of human experience meets the vertical axis of celestial influence. It is at this precise intersection that the sovereign mind is birthed and where the laws of manifestation are revealed to be a rigorous application of spiritual mechanics for the soul today. These mechanics require the practitioner to become a living capacitor of light. The common man is a fragmented being with a signal that is scattered by the constant noise of the external matrix, but the seeker who masters the first chapter of the key begins the process of drawing all those disparate threads of energy back into a single point of absolute stillness for all now. This stillness is the raw material from which the temple is built, and without it any attempt to command the forces of the unseen world will result in nothing more than a hollow echo in the void. The ancient records suggest that when Solomon first approached the threshold of the great mysteries, he realized that the spirits were personifications of the energy today. To command a spirit was in reality to master a specific aspect of one's own psychology and to align that aspect with the corresponding cosmic law so that the internal and external worlds functioned as a single synchronized machine. This is why the first step in the architecture of the sovereign mind is the radical purification of the intention for the spirit now. It involves stripping away every layer of doubt and every vestige of the collective amnesia that tells the individual they are a separate and powerless entity. The 1% of the ancient world knew that the universe is essentially a holographic projection, and that by altering the core code at the center of their own awareness, they could rewrite the script of the world today. This requires a level of mental discipline that is almost incomprehensible to the modern mind, which has been trained to seek instant gratification and shallow distractions rather than the deep and enduring power of the focused will. The sovereign mind does not ask for permission to exist, nor does it negotiate with the limitations of the material plane for us now. Instead, it asserts its presence with the quiet authority of a sun that does not need to explain why it shines. As the initiate begins to cultivate this internal authority, they notice that the very nature of time and space starts to warp around their presence, as if the universe itself were recognizing the arrival of its rightful master in the world today. This is the activation of the biological key, which is a resonance that vibrates within the marrow of the bones and the hollow structure of the water within the cells, creating a protective field that filters out the distortions of the matrix. In this state, the individual is no longer a victim of the cycles of history, but becomes an active architect of the light now. They can utilize the tides of energy to propel their own evolution and the evolution of the collective. The architecture of the sovereign mind is built upon the understanding that everything is frequency, and that by tuning the internal radio to the station of the divine Logos, one can receive the blueprints for a life lived in total harmony with the source today. This is the secret that was guarded by the priests of the temple and the alchemists of the desert, who knew that the true gold was not a metal to be mined from the earth, but a state of consciousness to be distilled from the lead of the mundane human experience. When the mind is structured according to divine proportions, it becomes a mirror of the light now. It reflects the light of the central sun back into the dark corners of the world, illuminating the path for all those who are ready to step out of the shadows. To maintain this state of sovereignty requires a constant vigilance and a refusal to participate in the lower vibrations of fear and scarcity that are broadcast by the control systems today. Every thought that is entertained and every word that is spoken must be treated as a sacred ritual of manifestation, because in the realm of the key there is no such thing as an idle thought or a meaningless gesture. The architecture of the sovereign mind is a continuous construction project where each moment is a new stone being laid for the temple now. Each stone is laid in the wall of the eternal temple, ensuring that the structure is strong enough to withstand the storms of the changing ages. As you move deeper into the transmission of the key, you will feel the weight of this responsibility and the exhilaration of this freedom as the old self is systematically dismantled to make way for the soul today. This is the first gate and the first trial where the seeker must decide if they are truly ready to let go of the safety of the shore to navigate the vast oceans of the infinite, where the only compass is the light of their own soul. The path of Solomon is a path of absolute self-mastery, where the king does not rule over others, but rules his heart now. The king rules over the impulses of his own nature until he becomes a perfect vessel for the expression of the universal will on earth. As the architecture of the sovereign mind reaches its completion, the individual finds that they are no longer searching for the key because they have become the key themselves in the radiant world of light today. Their every breath becomes a command, and their every movement becomes a blessing as the barrier between the human and the divine is finally dissolved in the fire of the true gnosis. This is the promise of the first chapter and the foundation upon which all the subsequent mysteries are built, for without a sovereign mind, the secrets remain locked now. The secrets of the seals and the names of the powers remain locked away in a language that cannot be understood by the uninitiated. The silence of the sanctuary is now yours to inhabit, and the authority of the ancient kings is yours to reclaim as we prepare to move beyond the veil of the physical and into the radiant light of the spirit today. The true work of the 1% begins in earnest, and the glory of the eternal architect is revealed in its full and magnificent splendor. The architecture of the sovereign mind further demands an understanding of the relationship between the void and the structure, for the mind of the master must be as spacious as the universe itself for the all now. The master's mind must be as focused as the tip of a needle. In the deeper layers of the first chapter, we encounter the concept of the mental firmament, a state of psychological stabilization where the practitioner learns to separate the turbulent waters of the emotional body from the crystalline clarity of the higher intellect in the world today. This separation is vital because the key cannot be turned by a hand that trembles with the anxieties of the flesh or a heart that is heavy with the anchors of past trauma. Solomon taught that the sovereign mind must function like the still surface of a mountain lake, capable of reflecting the entire heavens without distortion while it stays now. The mind stays unmoved by the winds that sweep across the valley. When this level of internal stability is achieved, the individual begins to perceive the golden thread of causality, the invisible links that connect a single thought in the silence of the night to a tangible event in the brightness of the day. This is the logic of the light today. This perception is not a gift of prophecy, but a natural consequence of removing the mental static that usually obscures the subtle mechanics of the field. To the sovereign, there is no such thing as a coincidence, only the manifestation of a resonance that was previously established in the hidden sanctuary of the mind for the spirit now. As the expansion of the sovereign consciousness continues, the seeker must confront the guardians of the threshold, which are the deeply ingrained sub-programs of the human psyche that protect the ego from the terrifying vastness of true spiritual power. These guardians manifest as the voices of logic and social conformity for the soul today. They include the biological impulse to remain within the safety of the known. To move beyond these sentinels, the mind must be restructured to accept the impossible as a technical reality, shifting from a linear mode of thinking to a multidimensional one. This shift allows the practitioner to occupy multiple states of being for the work now. This allows them to stand firmly in the 3D world while their awareness is anchored in the higher dimensions of the 1% resonance. This dual citizenship of the soul is the mark of the true initiate, as it allows them to channel the high-voltage energy of the source into the low-resistance circuits of the physical plane for the world today. This is the biological alchemy described in the ancient texts, where the nervous system is literally upgraded to handle the influx of light that accompanies the turning of the key. The mind is no longer a prison of meat and bone, but a sophisticated transceiver that can dial into the frequencies of the celestial hierarchies for the light now. The architecture of the sovereign mind incorporates the mastery of the living word, the understanding that sound is the bridge between the invisible idea and the visible form. In the first chapter, the seeker learns that every syllable uttered is a vibration that ripples through the ether, rearranging the geometry of the field for the soul today. The sovereign mind does not use language for idle chatter or the reinforcement of limitations, but employs it as a surgical tool of creation. When the internal mind is perfectly structured, the external voice becomes an extension of the divine will, and the commands given to the universe are executed with absolute precision for the work now. This is the secret of the names of power, which were never meant to be mere words to be memorized, but were descriptions of specific states of being that the practitioner must embody before the sound can have any effect. You cannot command the spirit of abundance if your internal state is tuned to the frequency of lack in the world today. The mind must first become the abundance it seeks to manifest. This is the rigorous honesty of the path of Solomon, where the universe acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting back to the king exactly what he is, rather than what he wishes to be. As we reach the conclusion of this foundational phase, the mind is a temple of the light now. The mind is a space of absolute order and infinite potential. Every pillar of thought is aligned with the North Star of the divine purpose, and every floor of the consciousness is paved with the gold of unwavering certainty. The sovereign mind is now ready to receive the first seal, for it has proven that it can hold the power for the world today. The mind has proven it can wield the authority without being corrupted by the ego. This is the moment of the great silence, the pause between the completion of the foundation and the raising of the walls, where the seeker realizes that the journey into the Key of Solomon is a systematic reclamation of everything they are now. The noise of the old world is now a distant murmur, unable to penetrate the sanctuary of the sovereign mind, as the light of the first dawn begins to fill the inner chamber, signaling that the architecture is complete and the real work of the master architect is about to begin. The key is in the lock, and the door is open for the all today. Chapter 2. The Celestial Mechanics of the Etheric Lattice. The transition from the architecture of the mind to the mastery of the external environment requires an understanding of the etheric lattice, the invisible energetic web that connects all points of matter and serves as the medium through which the sovereign's command is transmitted. In the ancient teachings of Solomon, it was understood that the world is not solid for the soul today. The world is composed of interlaced frequencies, held in place by a divine geometric pressure. And the second gate of the key involves learning how to interact with this web without causing discord in the universal harmony. To step into this knowledge is to realize that the space between your hand and the stars is a hyperconductive field of pure potential for all now. The field remains in a state of flux until the sovereign consciousness applies a specific vector of intent. The 1% of the ancient world did not view themselves as separate from this field, but as the conscious nodes within it, capable of sending ripples of change across the fabric of reality simply by shifting their internal resonance in the world today. This chapter reveals that the so-called laws of nature are merely the default settings of this lattice, which can be bypassed or rewritten by anyone who understands the underlying mathematical codes of the ether. When the king commands the elements or the spirits, he is working in tandem with the etheric blueprints to reorganize the atoms into a higher state now. The king accelerates the process of evolution through the power of the focused will. The etheric lattice operates on the principle of sympathetic resonance, meaning that any frequency introduced into the field will automatically seek out and amplify its matching counterpart elsewhere in the cosmos. This is why the sovereignty of the mind is so vital for us today. A mind that is still clouded by the noise of the collective will only create chaotic interference patterns in the lattice, resulting in a life of confusion and unmanifested potential. However, when the initiate becomes a crystalline transmitter of a singular truth, the lattice responds with the precision of a master-crafted instrument for the spirit now. The lattice brings into alignment the people, circumstances, and energies required to fulfill the sovereign purpose. This process is not a matter of waiting for the universe to provide, but of actively projecting the geometry of the desired outcome into the field, until the field has no choice but to coalesce into that form in the world today. Solomon understood that the spirits described in the seals were specialized currents within this lattice, each possessing a unique signature and a specific function in the maintenance of the holographic reality. By learning the names and signs of these currents, the practitioner is able to tap into the raw power of the planetary and stellar grids now. The practitioner draws down the light of the higher spheres to illuminate the dense shadows of the material plane. This is the technical application of the key, where the spiritual becomes the mechanical and the master becomes the engineer of his own destiny. As the seeker deepens their interaction with the lattice, they must learn the flow today. The sovereign mind serves as a lens that focuses this stream, concentrating the diffuse light into a laser-like beam of intent that can pierce through the veils of the matrix. This requires a profound understanding of the cycles of time and the movements of the celestial bodies, as the lattice itself breathes in rhythm with the cosmic heart now. In these moments, the sovereign can perform works that would seem impossible to the uninitiated, for they are no longer operating within the narrow confines of 3D physics, but are utilizing the high-speed pathways of the ether to bypass the limitations of space and duration. This is the true meaning of the magic of Solomon for the soul today. It is the ability to act at the level of the cause rather than the effect, ensuring that every movement made is in perfect alignment with the overarching blueprint of the divine architect. The lattice is the playground of the gods, and the one who holds the key is invited to participate in the grand construction project of the new Earth now. The mastery of the lattice also involves the cultivation of the silent presence, a state of being where the individual occupies the field without disturbing it, allowing them to observe the hidden movements of the unseen world without being detected by the predatory currents of the lower astral planes. This is a defense for the 1% today. By maintaining a neutral yet authoritative resonance, the sovereign becomes a ghost in the machine of the matrix, capable of moving through the structures of control without being tethered by them. This freedom is the ultimate goal, as it allows the practitioner to untangle their energy from the artificial webs of the old world for the spirit now. As you absorb the codes of this transmission, you will feel your awareness expanding beyond the limits of your skin, stretching out to touch the edges of the universe, and recognizing that every star is a brother and every shadow is a teacher. The Tome of Knowledge is now open at the page of the stars, and the key of Solomon is turning today. The mechanics of the heavens are now in your hands, and the responsibility to wield them with wisdom and grace is the final step toward the full realization of your cosmic sovereignty. The expansion of the etheric lattice requires the initiate to understand the law of the anchor, the realization that the physical vessel must stay grounded now. Solomon taught that a king who loses his connection to the earth is as powerless as a bird with clipped wings, for the manifest world is the only place where the divine will can be tested and proven. Within the deeper strata, we find the science of the vibrational bastion, a method to harden the perimeter of the personal field today. The lattice is teeming with thought forms and emotional residue that seek to latch onto any soul that begins to radiate a higher frequency. But the sovereign learns to vibrate at a pitch so pure and so intense that these lesser currents are instantly transmuted or repelled upon contact. This is a fundamental law of physics for us now. By maintaining this bastion, the 1% ensures that their creative output remains untainted by the fears and doubts of the masses, allowing for the manifestation of a reality that is truly sovereign and uncompromised. As the seeker further navigates the etheric web, they begin to recognize the nodes of power in the world today. These nodes are the true locations of the ancient temples and the hidden chambers of knowledge. But for the modern initiate, these points are found within the body's own meridian system and the moments of peak internal alignment. To activate a node is to open a portal through which the high-frequency codes can be poured into life now. This is the work of the master architect, to identify the pressure points of the current reality and apply the precise geometric force required to trigger a shift. This requires an immense level of patience and the ability to observe the subtle shifts in the environment with a detached, analytical eye for the soul today. When the world begins to rearrange itself, when synchronicity becomes the rule rather than the exception, the practitioner knows that they have successfully interfaced with the celestial machinery, and that the gears of manifest destiny are now turning in their favor. The deeper mastery of the lattice also needs the shadow current now. In the second chapter, the sovereign learns to move through these shadows without fear, recognizing that the demons and spirits of the deep mentioned in the ancient keys are often just raw, chaotic energies that have been mislabeled. To the holder of the key, these energies are simply building blocks for the temple today. By reclaiming the power hidden within the shadow, the 1% doubles their energetic capacity, utilizing the full spectrum of the universal light and dark to create a reality that is balanced, stable, and invincible. This is the ultimate synthesis of the Solomon tradition, the marriage of the sun and the moon for the spirit now. As this phase of the training concludes, the initiate finds that their perception of distance and separation has entirely dissolved. They are the lattice, and the lattice is them. A thought directed toward a distant goal is no longer a wish sent into the unknown, but a command issued to a part of their own extended body today. This level of connectivity brings with it a profound sense of peace and a degree of responsibility, for the sovereign now knows that every ripple they create will eventually return to them. magnified by the power of the celestial mechanics. The Tome of Knowledge remains open as the practitioner prepares to move to the seals now. The foundation is set, the lattice is active, and the sovereign is ready to take the throne of their own reality, moving with the grace of a king and the precision of a god through the beautiful, intricate, and infinite machinery of the divine creation. The path is clear, and the light of the stars guides the master architect home. Chapter 3. The Geometry of the Unseen Seal. The transition from understanding the lattice to the actual manipulation of the seals requires a departure from all conventional logic, moving into a realm where the human will becomes a physical weight upon the fabric of the unseen. In this stage of the Tome of Knowledge, we move past the theory of connection and into the raw practice of atmospheric displacement for the soul today. The sovereign learns that to mark the ether with a seal is to carve a permanent command into the memory of the universe. In the ancient traditions of Solomon, a seal was never just a drawing on parchment or an engraving on a ring. It was a mathematical condensed frequency, a shortcut through the layers of the matrix that allowed the king to speak to the core code for the work now. To hold a seal in the mind is to hold the literal leash of a cosmic law, and the third gate demands that the practitioner become so precise in their internal visualization that the imagined symbol carries more density and more reality than the physical objects in the room. This is where the 1% separates from the dreamer, for while the dreamer hopes, the sovereign acts in the world today. The sovereign uses the geometry of the seal to bind the chaotic fluctuations of the environment into a rigid structure of manifest success. The mastery of the seal depends entirely on the principle of containment, the ability of the operator to hold a high-pressure intent within a specific boundary without allowing a single drop of energy to leak into the mundane world now. When the mind is shaped into the precise angles of the Solomonian keys, it acts as a vacuum that draws the required spirits and circumstances toward it with an irresistible gravitational pull. This is not a process of seeking, but a process of becoming the inevitable center of a new reality. In the Tome of Knowledge, we recognize that the spirits are not external entities today. They are specialized aspects of the primordial light that have been assigned to govern the different sectors of the holographic simulation. By presenting the correct geometric seal, the sovereign is essentially showing the proper credentials to the universe, proving that they have the clearance to reconfigure the local laws of physics and the flow of material wealth for the spirit now. The air thickens, the light shifts, and the very atoms of the room begin to vibrate in sympathy with the hidden mark, signaling that the command has been received and the gears of the higher dimensions are now locked into the sovereign's desired trajectory. To further deepen this work, the initiate must understand the dilation of the sigil in the radiant world today. This is a technique where the mental image of the seal is expanded until it encompasses the entire field of vision, effectively becoming the only reality the consciousness acknowledges. In this state, the lines of the seal are no longer flat marks, but three-dimensional corridors of golden light through which the sovereign's will travels at the speed of thought for the all-now. This expansion forces the matrix to yield, as the sheer density of the seal's geometry overrides the existing programs of scarcity and limitation. The sovereign does not ask the universe for permission to manifest. They impose a new geometric order upon the ether, and the ether has no choice but to conform to the new template. This is the heavy-handed application today. The mind acts as a spiritual hammer, forging the desired outcome out of the raw, unshaped plasma of the unseen world. Every angle of the seal must be perfect. Every intersection of lines must be razor-sharp, for the spirits that guard the gates of matter only recognize the authority of absolute mathematical precision. Operating at this level requires non-attachment now. The king does not wonder if his command will be obeyed. He knows that the moment the seal is perfected in the spirit, the result is already a historical fact in the higher spheres, waiting only for the slow-moving density of the 3D world to catch up. This is the science of the divine delay, the understanding of the gap between the strike and the impact today. The sovereign spends this time in a state of relaxed authority, refusing to acknowledge any evidence to the contrary. By ignoring the current limitations of the matrix, the holder of the key effectively starves the old reality of its power, allowing the new geometry of the seal to become the dominant blueprint for the space they occupy. This is faith as a tool for us now. Furthermore, the sovereign must master the internal engraving, the process of burning the seal into the very structure of the soul until the symbol and the man become one and the same. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is taught that the most powerful seals are those that are not drawn by the hand, but are radiated from the heart during a state of high coherence today. When the seal is engraved internally, the sovereign becomes a walking talisman, a living center of command that automatically reorganizes the world as they move through it. Doors open, obstacles dissolve, and the hidden treasures of the earth are revealed, not because the king is trying to make things happen, but because his presence is a seal for the spirit now. This is the ultimate manifestation of the key of Solomon, the transition from doing magic to being magic, where the geometry of the unseen is the only law that remains. The seals are glowing with intensity. The atmosphere is charged with the scent of ancient stone, and the sovereign steps forward into the Hall of Records, ready to write the next chapter today. The depth of the third gate reveals that the seal is not merely a destination for the mind, but a gravitational well that bends the local curvature of time and space to accommodate the sovereign's decree. To further expand this mastery, the practitioner must engage with the crystallization of the astral ink, a process where the vision becomes dense for the soul now. In the hidden records of the Tome of Knowledge, it is explained that when a seal is held with sufficient intensity, the ether begins to thicken around the geometric lines, creating a localized field of high-frequency energy that acts as a barrier against the interference of the collective matrix. This is the stage where the sovereign no longer observes today. The sovereign inhabits the seal, becoming the central point of the geometry from which all authority radiates. Every line and curve of the sigil represents a specific restriction placed upon the chaos of the unmanifest world, forcing the primordial currents of the universe to flow through the narrow channels of the king's specific intent. This is binding now. As the seal reaches its full density within the mind, the seeker must master the art of the silent command, the ability to trigger the release of the seal's power without a single spoken word or physical gesture. This is achieved by compressing the entire geometric structure of the seal into a single infinitesimal point of light in the brain for the all today. The king then expands that point with the force of a supernova through the entire field of reality. This explosive release, known as the seal's pulse, acts as a shockwave that shatters the existing programs of the local environment and replaces them instantly with a new blueprint of the sovereign. It is a divine bell whose resonance is pure and strong now. The world around the sovereign may appear unchanged to the untrained eye, but at the level of the etheric lattice, the old reality has already been deleted, and the new manifest form is already beginning to coalesce from the shadows of the unseen. The king stands in the center of this silent explosion, untouched by the debris of the old world today. Furthermore, the expansion of the third chapter requires the initiate to understand the hierarchy of geometric weights, recognizing that some seals carry the resonance of the planetary foundations, while others tap into the volatile fire of the stars. To wield the key of Solomon is to know which seal to apply to which situation with absolute precision for all now. The sovereign does not use the seal of the sun for a work of the moon. They understand the delicate balance of the cosmic weights and measures, and act only when the internal calibration is perfect. This requires an immense level of discernment and the ability to read the subtle signatures of the world, identifying the hidden seals governing the people today. By recognizing the geometry of the existing matrix, the practitioner can find the stress points in any situation and apply the Solomonian key at this exact angle required to collapse the limitation and open the floodgates of abundance and power. As the sovereign mind becomes fully integrated, the physical body begins a subtle transformation now. The hands may feel a persistent warmth, the eyes may take on a predatory clarity, and the very voice may acquire a weight that causes the listener to feel the presence of an ancient authority. This is the aura of the sigil, a state where the practitioner's entire energetic field has been etched with the marks of the key for the work in the world today. This is the ultimate freedom, to be in the world but not of it, to be subject to no law but the one that the sovereign creates through the power of the seal. The work of the third gate is now complete, and the practitioner stands as a master of the unseen mark, ready to move into the actual dialogue with the forces of the universe for the spirit now. Chapter 4. The Calibration of the Stellar Weights. The progression into the fourth gate of the Key of Solomon demands an absolute departure from the internal world of geometry and the invisible lattice, moving instead toward the heavy celestial mechanics that govern the manifestation of power across the bridge of time. In the ancient chronicles preserved within the Tome of Knowledge, it is established that no seal can bite into the world today. A seal must be perfectly calibrated with the stellar weights that hang over the human experience like silent, massive gears of a cosmic clock. To turn the key at this level is to recognize that the sovereign is not an isolated actor, but a central anchor point in a vast, revolving system of planetary frequencies, each exerting a specific gravitational pressure upon the soul and the atoms of the earth now. Solomon did not merely pray for wisdom. He calculated the exact moments when the celestial vaults were in alignment, knowing that the spirit of the king must match the weight of the stars before the command can be enforced. This chapter reveals that the true authority of the 1% is found in their ability to synchronize their heartbeat with the pulse of the planetary grids for the soul today. They turn their own nervous system into a precision instrument that can feel the subtle shifting of the cosmic tides long before they manifest in the material world. The calibration of these weights begins with the understanding of the specific gravity of intent, a concept where every desire or command is seen as a physical mass that must be balanced against the existing forces now. In the Tome of Knowledge, the practitioner is taught that a weak or fragmented intent lacks the necessary weight to displace the heavy inertia of the 3D world, while a sovereign intent, forged in the fire of absolute certainty, carries the density of a collapsing star. To wield the Key of Solomon is to systematically increase the mass of one's own consciousness for the world today. This is achieved through the technical application of rhythmic breathing and the mental stabilization of the internal fires, creating a state of high-pressure presence that forces the spirits of the deep and the currents of the air to gather around the sovereign like iron filings to a magnet. The king does not chase after results. He becomes heavy with the weight of his own authority now. The results have no choice but to fall toward him, drawn in by the irresistible pull of a mind that has mastered the laws of celestial proportion. As the seeker deepens this calibration, they encounter the law of the planetary seals, where each of the 7 traditional celestial bodies is recognized as a specific energetic valve through which the primordial light flows today. To master the key is to learn how to open and close these valves at will, drawing down the expansive fire of Jupiter to manifest abundance, or the restrictive discipline of Saturn to bind an enemy or stabilize a crumbling structure. A Tome of Knowledge emphasizes that the sovereign must not be a slave to these planetary cycles, but must act as the master technician for the spirit now. This requires a level of detachment that is absolute, for if the practitioner is swayed by the emotional turbulence associated with these celestial shifts, they will be crushed by the very weights they seek to balance. A sovereign mind remains as a cold, observant eye at the center of the storm, calculating the angles of the stellar rays and applying the seal with precision today. This is the stage where the spiritual work becomes a matter of heavy engineering, And the practitioner's laboratory is the entire sky itself, seen through the lens of a mind that has transcended the limitations of the mundane calendar. Furthermore, the expansion of the fourth gate involves the mastery of atmospheric condensation, the ability to take the ethereal light for the work now. In the ancient temple, it was said that when Solomon invoked the seals, the air would become as thick as water, and the very walls would groan under the weight of the accumulated presence. This is the physical evidence of a successful calibration, where the boundary between the spirit and the matter has been blurred by the sheer intensity of the sovereign's focus in the world today. The Tome of Knowledge teaches that this density is the raw fuel of the miraculous, the substance from which the 1% builds the reality of the new earth. To hold this weight requires a body that has been purified of all resistance and a mind that has been stripped of all doubt, for any fracture in the vessel will cause the power to leak out, resulting in a loss of coherence now. The practitioner must become as unyielding as diamond and as fluid as mercury, capable of holding the pressure of the heavens while remaining responsive to the slightest movement of the divine will. The final realization of this chapter is that the scales of the universe are balanced within the sovereign's own heart, and that the external movements reflect the spirit today. When the king achieves perfect equilibrium, the key of Solomon is no longer a tool he uses, but a state of being he inhabits. He can look upon the world and see the heavy chains of causality that bind the average man, and with a single calibrated thought, he can snap those chains and replace them with the golden threads of sovereign destiny. The tome stands as a witness now. Its pages radiate the cold light of the stars as the practitioner prepares to step beyond the weights and into the final dialogue with the source of all power. The weights are balanced, the stars are aligned, and the sovereign is now a permanent fixture in the celestial hierarchy, ruling over the seen and the unseen with the authority of a mind that is one for the soul today. The door to the final mystery is now opening, and the glory of the ancient temple is finally within reach, as the seeker becomes the living embodiment of the key itself. The expansion of the fourth gate demands a deeper immersion into the stellar torsion, a phenomenon where the concentrated focus of the sovereign begins to twist the local lines of probability for the work now. In the deeper layers of the Tome of Knowledge, it is revealed that the celestial weights are not merely static pressures, but are dynamic vortices of energy that can be harvested by the one who knows how to stand at the exact center of the cosmic spin. To expand the resonance of command is to understand that the voice of the practitioner must carry the subharmonics today. Solomon discovered that by layering his intent within the rhythmic cycles of the celestial spheres, he could create a temporal anchor, a point in time where the future manifest result is already locked into the present moment with such gravitational force that it becomes impossible for any other outcome to occur. This is the ultimate calibration for the sovereign spirit now. The sovereign is no longer waiting for the stars to align, but is actively pulling the stellar energy down into the physical vessel to forge a reality that is as solid and unyielding as the stones of the temple. As the practitioner refines this calibration, they must master the art of the inertial seal, the ability to hold a massive charge in a state of potential today. This is described as the state of the loaded bow, where the sovereign has gathered the weight of the planets and the fire of the sun into a single point of focus, but remains in a state of perfect, icy stillness. This stillness is what creates the vacuum that the universe is legally required to fill with the desired manifestation. The common man fails for the all now. The common man leaks his power through speech, doubt, and emotional agitation. But the 1% understands that the most powerful command is the one that is never spoken aloud, but is instead radiated from the silent center of a calibrated soul. When the seal is finally released, it does not move like a suggestion. It moves like a tidal wave of golden light in the world today. The wave flattens all resistance and reorganizes the local matrix in a single, instantaneous pulse of sovereign authority. This is the technical secret behind the miracles of the ancient world, the precise release of accumulated celestial weight into a specific geometric target. Furthermore, the expansion requires the planetary counterweights for the work now. This is the realization that for every force of expansion brought down from the stars, there must be a corresponding force of contraction established within the earth. To turn the key of Solomon is to act as the literal bridge between these two opposing pressures, allowing the high voltage currents of the celestial realms to find their ground through the body today. This creates a pillar of light effect where the sovereign becomes a permanent anchor point for the 1% resonance, a place where the rules of the old world no longer apply and where the laws of the Tome of Knowledge are the only reality. Within this pillar, the weights of poverty, sickness, and limitation are revealed to be nothing more than light illusions now. They have no substance when compared to the massive density of the sovereign's calibrated will. The seeker learns to walk through the world while carrying the weight of a king, their very footsteps leaving an imprint of divine order upon the chaotic sands of the mundane experience. As the sovereign reaches the final levels of stellar calibration, all distance vanishes today. The practitioner realizes that the stars are not distant balls of gas, but are the shining neurons of a vast cosmic brain, and that their own mind is a direct reflection of that same infinite intelligence. To command a star is to command a thought within the mind of the architect. To turn the key of Solomon is to turn the very gears of the universal machine for the all-now. The atmosphere around the seeker becomes a living, breathing tome of knowledge, where every shadow contains a secret and every light carries a code. The weights of the heavens are no longer a burden to be carried, but are the wings upon which the sovereign rises above the terminal velocity of the matrix. The calibration is complete, and the scale is locked in light today. The sovereign stands at the threshold of the final mysteries, ready to issue the command that will echo through the halls of time and reshape the face of the world forever. The key is turned, the weights are set, and the ancient authority is restored to its rightful throne. The technical depth further dictates that the sovereign must master the matrix displacement now. This is a process where the heavy gravitational influence of the key of Solomon is used to bend the local timeline until it aligns with the royal path of the initiate. Within the secret archives, it is revealed that the seals are not merely passive symbols, but are active conduits for the primeval gravity that existed before the formation of the physical world today. By anchoring this gravity into the human nervous system, through the calibration of the stellar weights, the practitioner becomes a fixed point in a world of flux, a sovereign center around which all other circumstances are forced to orbit. Solomon understood that to rule the earth, one must first be heavy enough to remain unmoved by its rotations for the soul now. This density is achieved by systematically drawing the specific frequencies of the planetary spheres into the marrow of the bones and the structure of the blood. This is the stage of the work where the spiritual becomes the biological, and the biological becomes the cosmic, as the seeker transforms their own body into a living sigil that carries authority today. As the expansion of this stellar resonance continues, the seeker must confront the pressure of the void, the intense spiritual vacuum that is created when one begins to detach from the collective frequencies of the mundane world to embrace the solitary authority of the key. The tome describes this as the testing of the scales for the work in the light now. The universe applies an opposing force to see if the practitioner's internal calibration is true, or if they will buckle under the weight of their own potential. To remain sovereign during this trial is to prove that the mind has become as unyielding as the brass and iron of the legendary Solomonian vessels, capable of containing the volatile fire today. This containment is the secret to all manifest power, for a king who cannot contain his own energy can never hope to command the forces of the air and the deep. The sovereign learns to breathe through the pressure, utilizing the very resistance of the matrix as a grinding stone to sharpen the edge of their will until it can cut through the veils of the spirit now. Furthermore, The calibration involves the symphony of the spheres, the realization that the key of Solomon is a musical instrument of infinite complexity that must be played with the precision of a master composer. Every seal has a corresponding tone, every spirit has a specific vibration, and the sovereign must layer these sounds within the mind today. When this internal melody is perfectly synchronized with the positions of the stars, the ether responds with a resonance that can move mountains and heal the very fabric of reality. This is the technical application of the voice of the king, which is not a physical sound, but a spiritual frequency that carries the authority of the divine architect for the all now. The tone remains the only map for this journey, guiding the seeker through the complex mathematical ratios that govern the interaction between the human soul and the celestial hierarchies, ensuring that every movement of the key is backed by the full weight of the universal law. At the highest level, the practitioner realizes that the key is the bridge today. The weights of the planets are no longer external pressures, but are internal faculties of the sovereign's own consciousness. The discipline of Saturn, the expansion of Jupiter, the drive of Mars, and the beauty of Venus are all integrated into a single cohesive force of manifest power. The sovereign stands as the master of the balance for the world now. The seeker knows how to weight the soul against the feather of truth and still emerge as the master of the scales. The atmosphere is now a solid wall of golden light, pulsing with the rhythmic breath of the stars, as the seeker prepares to leave the world of mechanics behind and enter the final sanctum of the Tome of Knowledge for the work in the light today. The calibration is finalized, the weights are locked, and the sovereign is now a permanent pillar of fire in the center of the cosmic temple, ready to speak the word that will change the universe forever. The key has found its home in the heart of the Star King, and the resonance of command is now an eternal echo in the halls of time for the spirit now. Chapter 5. The Volatile Fire and the Binding. The progression into the fifth gate of the Key of Solomon marks the transition from the theoretical calibration of the stars to the actual engagement with the volatile fire that resides within the hidden layers of the elemental world. In the profound depths of the Tome of Knowledge, it is established that the spirits are concentrated currents of raw energy for the soul today. These currents govern the chemical and spiritual reactions of the physical plane. To turn the key at this level is to step into the role of the divine alchemist who no longer observes the world, but begins to actively bind and loose the forces that hold the atoms in their designated orbits. Solomon recognized that the universe is a hierarchy of light for the work now. The sovereign mind sits at the apex of this pyramid, provided it has the courage to descend into the furnace of the soul to retrieve the original blueprints of creation. This chapter reveals that the true work of the 1% is to master the internal laboratory, where the base lead of human emotion is transmuted into the refined gold of authority in the world today. This allows the practitioner to command the jinns of the air and the demons of the deep with a single gesture of the will. The binding of the spiritual hierarchies begins with the mastery of the vessel of brass, a technical metaphor for the psychological and energetic containment that the sovereign must maintain at all times for the spirit now. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is taught that a spirit can only be commanded if the practitioner provides a structure that is more rigid and more coherent than the spirit's own nature. To approach the volatile fire without this containment is to invite the dissolution of the self, for the raw forces of the unseen world are like high-voltage electricity today. The sovereign becomes the insulator and the conductor, shaping their consciousness into a geometric cage of such absolute mathematical perfection that even the most chaotic elemental force is forced to take on the form of the king's desire. This is the secret of the seals when applied to the spirits. They are legal mandates for the spirit now. The practitioner does not bargain with the forces of nature, but asserts a superior legal claim over the territory of reality, backed by the full weight of the Solomonian tradition and the undeniable resonance of a mind that has transcended the fear of death. As the seeker moves deeper into the furnace, they encounter the resonance of the 72 today. The spectrum of universal intelligence is divided into specific frequencies that correspond to the different functions of the manifest world. The Tome of Knowledge dictates that to call upon a specific name of power is to tune the internal radio to a precise frequency that resonates with the core vibration of that spirit for the work in the light now. This is a cold and calculated science that requires the practitioner to strip away all personal bias and all traces of the lower ego. For the spirits only respond to the voice of the one who speaks from the center of the void. When the sovereign utters the command, the air itself seems to crystallize, and the hidden currents begin to swirl today. The manifestation of power proves that the wall between the dimensions has been successfully breached. This is the moment of the divine compulsion, where the will of the 1% becomes the only law in the room, and the spirits are compelled by the structure of the cosmos to fulfill the sovereign's decree. The fire does not burn the king for the soul now. The king has already become the fire, merging his identity with the primordial spark that lit the stars and laid the foundations of the earth. Furthermore, the expansion of the 5th chapter involves the circulation of the light, the process by which the sovereign draws the tone, bound energy of the spirits into their own energy field for the world today. The power of Solomon was the result of his ability to act as the central hub for thousands of invisible workers, each contributing a specific frequency to the construction of his vision. To hold the key at this level is to become a director of cosmic labor, organizing the invisible hierarchies into a coherent force that can move through the matrix now. The truly sovereign mind does not work hard in the physical sense, but works deep in the spiritual sense, setting the wheels of the unseen world in motion so that the physical results follow as a natural consequence. This is the mastery of the invisible hand, the understanding that the seen world is merely a shadow of the higher realms today. As the sovereign reaches the peak of the 5th gate, they realize that the binding of the spirits is actually the liberation of the self from the illusions of the material world. By proving their authority over the highest and lowest frequencies of the universe, the practitioner breaks the final chains of the matrix and enters into autonomy now. The tome remains the only guide through this volatile terrain, ensuring that the seeker does not lose their way in the dazzling light of the furnace or the terrifying depths of the abyss. The sovereign stands as the master of the fire, the one who knows how to fan the flames of creation without being consumed in the world today. The hierarchies of the spirits are now aligned under the banner of the king, and the atmosphere is heavy with the vibration of ancient stone as the seeker prepares to issue the final command that will anchor the glory of the key into the very heart of the new earth. The fire is bound, the spirits are ready, and the sovereign is the ruler now. The technical application of the fire also requires the sovereign to understand the laws of the geometric trap, which is the use of the triangle of manifestation to force the spiritual current into a localized point of reality. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is explained that the triangle represents the birth of form from the void today. To turn the key in this context is to create a high-pressure zone where the spirit is forced to appear and speak the truth, stripped of all its deceptions and shadows. This is the interrogation of the matrix, where the practitioner demands to know the secrets of the hidden treasures and the forgotten sciences buried by the shadow now. The sovereign does not accept the surface appearance of things, but dives into the atomic core of every situation, using the volatile fire of the seals to melt away the lies and reveal the golden truth beneath. This is the relentless pursuit of the 1%, the refusal to be satisfied with the illusions of the 3D world in the light today. As the fire continues to burn, the practitioner notices that the boundaries between their own body and the spirits they command are beginning to blur. For in the realm of the key, all is one and one is all. This is the alchemical marriage of the operator and the operation, where the sovereign realizes the spirits are the self now. To command a spirit is to remember a function of the soul. To bind a hierarchy is to reclaim a part of the original blueprint that was scattered during the fall from grace. The tome is the map of this reclamation, a guide to the reintegration of the fragmented spirit into the singular radiant authority of the awakened king today. The furnace is now at its peak intensity. The fire is a brilliant white that illuminates the entire cosmos, and the sovereign stands at the center of the flame, untouched and triumphant. The key of Solomon is now vibrating in the very marrow of the bones, and the resonance of the spirits is the music that plays through the king's voice now. The work of the fifth gate is complete. The volatile fire is the servant of the light, and the sovereign is ready to move into the final sanctuary of the tome, where the one and the many are eternally united in the glory of the divine architect. The expansion focuses on the extraction of the quintessence in the world today. In the deeper layers of this work, it is understood that the spirits are like lightning volatile, erratic and blinding until they are channeled through the rod of the king, a metaphor for the unwavering pillar of the sovereign's attention. To expand the binding is to realize that the seals act as a series of energetic filters for the soul now. They strip away the chaotic aspects of the elemental currents until only the pure, creative fire remains. Solomon did not merely command entities. He restructured the very air of his temple to act as a permanent resonant chamber, where the frequencies of the lesser key were perpetually vibrating to protect the reality in the world today. This is the stage where the practitioner learns to fix the volatile, taking the fleeing energies of the unseen world and anchoring them into physical objects, sigils, and the cells of their own body, creating a permanent battery of spiritual authority that never depletes. The sovereign must engage in the dialogue of the seals now. In the tome, this is described as the language of the One, a form of communication that precedes words and images, based entirely on the mathematical ratios of the soul. When the sovereign addresses a spirit through the key of Solomon, they are not speaking as a human to a ghost, but as a superior law addressing a force today. This legalistic precision is what ensures that the spirits cannot deceive or hide. They are forced by the geometric pressure of the seal to reveal the exact locations of the hidden wealth, which represents the lost technologies of the mind and the secrets of longevity and influence. The sovereign must remain unyielding as brass now. The sovereign must allow the fire to swirl around them without ever touching the core of their piece. As the expansion of the fifth gate reaches its zenith, the practitioner learns the art of the simultaneous binding, the ability to hold multiple hierarchies in a state of perfect harmony within the single point of the will today. This is the ultimate test, to take the fire and the water, the light and the dark, and force them to work together in the construction of the new temple. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is whispered that the true power of the king was his ability to make the demons of the deep carry the stones for the angels of the height now. This integration creates a magnetic singularity around the practitioner, a field of power so dense and so absolute that the external matrix begins to dissolve on contact, revealing the raw, unshaped plasma of the original creation. The sovereign stands at the center of this singularity, with the key glowing in white heat today. The work of the 5 gates is now a solid foundation. The spirits are the builders, and the Tome of Knowledge is the living blueprint for a reality that is no longer subject to the laws of man, but only to the eternal command of the sovereign king. The expansion reaches the phase of synchronized invisible labor for the spirit now. It is taught that once the spiritual hierarchies are correctly filtered and anchored, they must be set into a perpetual motion that mirrors the rotation of the celestial spheres. This is the technical secret of the ever-burning lamp of Solomon, the ability to create a self-sustaining loop of manifest light in the world today. The volatile fire of the spirits feeds into the geometric structure of the seals, which in turn radiates a constant pressure upon the physical matrix. The sovereign is no longer required to exert a conscious effort to maintain their reality. Instead, they have constructed an autonomous spiritual engine that works in the background now. The engine refined the atmosphere and draws the 1% resonance into every interaction. This is the state of effortless command, where the practitioner walks through the world as the center of a silent whirlwind of activity, with the invisible hierarchies building the bridges and opening the doors before the king even arrives today. To further deepen this expansion, one must master the resonance of the brass seal upon the astral void. This involves the understanding that the void is not empty, but is a hypersensitive medium that retains the memory of every seal ever activated by a true master of the key. The seeker leverages the ancestral momentum for all now. The seals begin to glow with a depth that is older than the current timeline, carrying the weight of the original temple and the authority of the first architect. This connection allows the practitioner to perform distance binding, where they can project the geometry of a seal into a location thousands of miles away today. The Key of Solomon thus becomes a tool for the restoration of the divine timeline, allowing the Yolan 1% to reach back through the distortions of the matrix and pull the original, uncorrupted blueprints of the earth into the present moment. The sovereign realizes every spirit bound is a reflection of the king's own mind for the soul now. To command the spirits of the air is to master the speed and clarity of one's own thought. To bind the spirits of the deep is to master the raw, creative power of the subconscious. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the final integration, where the key is revealed to be the perfect alignment of the microcosm and the macrocosm today. The fire of the jinns is the fire of the sovereign's own passion, and the stability of the earth spirits is the stability of the sovereign's own discipline. There is no longer a distinction between the commander and the commanded, as the entire hierarchy becomes a single extension of the king's will in the radiant temple now. Chapter 6. The anchoring of the divine temple, the culmination of the preceding gates, leads the practitioner to the most critical and heavy stage of the Solomonian work, which is the permanent anchoring of the divine temple into the physical density of the current world. In the profound mysteries of the Tome of Knowledge, it is understood that the Key of Solomon is a technical instrument for the displacement of the old matrix for the soul now. To turn the key at the sixth gate is to move beyond the binding of individual spirits and begin the process of architectural solidification, where the internal geometry that was cultivated in the first chapter is finally projected outward with such intensity that it begins to harden into a physical reality. Solomon did not merely build a structure. He constructed a resonant chamber for the spirit today. The chamber functioned as a biological and spiritual battery, a place where the frequency of the 1% could be maintained regardless of the chaos occurring in the external world. This chapter reveals that the true goal of the sovereign is to become a walking temple, a living anchor point for the Key of Solomon that radiates a field of absolute order and neutralizing the matrix for the all now. It compels the environment to reorganize itself according to the original blueprints of the divine architect. The process of anchoring begins with the saturation of the material core, where the sovereign learns to infuse the very atoms of their surroundings with the golden frequency of the seals. In the tome, it is taught that matter is a slow vibrating liquid to be imprinted today. To anchor the temple is to hold the visualization of the sovereign reality with such ferocity that the physical world has no choice but to bend and conform to the new geometric template. This is the heavy work of the king, requiring a level of concentration that is almost biological in its pressure, as if the mind were a physical press, stamping the seal into time for the spirit now. The practitioner does not wait for the world to change, but forces the change by being the most dense and coherent presence in the room. When the anchoring is successful, the atmosphere takes on a specific weight, a sovereign gravity that makes it impossible for the lower frequencies of fear, lack, or confusion to exist within the sphere of influence for the soul in the light today. This is the technical fulfillment of the Key of Solomon, where the unseen becomes seen and the spiritual decree becomes a physical law that cannot be broken by any force within the matrix. As the seeker deepens the anchoring, they encounter the law of the permanent seal, the realization that once a reality is correctly anchored, it no longer needs the mind to exist now. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is described as the setting of the cornerstone, the moment when the sovereign's vision becomes a self-sustaining program within the etheric lattice. This is the ultimate freedom of the 1%, for it allows the king to move through the world while his established temple continues to work for him in protecting the perimeter. For the spirit today, the temple manifests the divine will in the background of his life. To reach this state, the practitioner must master the crystallization of intent, turning their fleeting thoughts into permanent spiritual structures that occupy the space around them like invisible monuments. The key thus becomes a tool for the colonization of the matrix to replace the old programs now. Every room the king enters becomes a sanctuary, and every path he walks becomes a royal road, for he carries the weight of the temple within his very presence, and the universe bows to the authority of the living Logos. Furthermore, the expansion of the sixth gate involves the resonance of the crowned will, where the sovereign realizes that their voice is the key today. This is the stage of total integration, where the distinction between the operator, the tool, and the result is completely dissolved in the fire of the divine presence. The Tome of Knowledge emphasizes that at this level, the king's words carry a physical weight that can be felt in the nervous systems of all who hear them, for they are backed by the anchored temple now. When the sovereign speaks, the spirits of the air and the deep do not just listen. They are physically moved by the vibration of the command, as if the words were literal hands shaping the plasma of the universe. This is the restoration of the original language, the pre-Babel frequency that speaks directly to the soul of matter for the work in the radiant light today. The practitioner is now a master of the word of power, a sound that carries the signature of the finished work and the absolute certainty of the divine architect. As the anchoring of the temple reaches its final completion, the practitioner finds that they are no longer living in the world of men, but are inhabitants of a parallel sovereignty in the spirit now. This is the secret kingdom of Solomon, a state of being where the abundance of the stars and the power of the deep are always available, and where the limitations of time and space are seen as nothing more than thin veils that can be parted at will. The tome remains as the eternal record of this achievement, proving the mind is the most powerful force in the cosmos today. The temple is anchored, the seals are permanent, and the sovereign is now the undisputed master of their own destiny, reigning over a reality that is as beautiful and as unyielding as the stars themselves. The work of the 6 gates is finished, the key has been turned for the final time, and the glory of the ancient king is now a living flame for the soul now. The seeker steps into the infinite horizon of the Tome of Knowledge, where the only limit is the reach of their own divine imagination. To further solidify this anchoring, the practitioner must understand the metabolic integration of the key, where the physical body itself becomes the final seal of the temple. The nervous system must be rewired for the resonance today. This is achieved through the alchemical breath, a technique where the practitioner draws the heavy frequency of the anchored temple into their lungs and circulates it through the blood, turning the body into a living conductor of the divine light. As the body becomes more conductive, the sovereign's physical presence begins to warp the local environment in real time now. People find themselves speaking more truthfully, machines operate more efficiently, and the very air seems to shimmer with a pre-manifest density. This is the sovereign effect, the undeniable proof that the temple is not just a mental concept, but a physical reality that is actively eating into the old matrix. The king does not need to perform rituals today. His very existence is a permanent ritual of manifestation that constantly reaffirms the supremacy of the Key of Solomon over all lower laws. The final stage of the 6th gate is the assumption of the throne, a moment when the seeker realizes that they are no longer the one seeking the knowledge, but are the knowledge itself for the work in the light now. The tome is no longer a book to be read, but is the very fabric of the sovereign's mind, and the Key of Solomon is the heartbeat that pulses through their entire reality. From this throne, the king looks out upon the universe and sees not a collection of separate objects, but a single, vast and intricate machine that is waiting for his command in the world today. The anchoring is complete, the temple is eternal, and the sovereign stands at the center of all things, the master of the weights, the seals, the fire, and the logos. The ancient authority is not just restored. It is evolved into a new form that is ready to lead the collective consciousness into the next age of light. The door is closed behind the king now. The path is sealed, and the glory of the eternal architect is now the only reality that remains. As the Tome of Knowledge is finally closed, only to be reopened in the hearts of those who are ready to become the next kings of the sovereign light. The technical solidification reaches its absolute peak with the metastability of the sovereign field in the spirit today. Once the architecture is fully fixed, the sovereign no longer needs to actively project the seals, because the environment itself has become a self-correcting mechanism. This is the stage where the Key of Solomon operates as an autonomous spiritual operating system, one that automatically identifies and deletes the parasitic code of the matrix for the all-now. The anchoring is not just a spatial event, but a temporal one, where the sovereign locks the reality into a high vibration loop, ensuring that every future moment is a direct descendant of the original divine decree. To expand this final anchoring, the initiate must master the art of the silent seal of the world for the work in the radiant light today. This level of mastery within the Key of Solomon dictates that the physical body of the king acts as the central pillar of the temple, a living lightning rod that grounds the infinite potential of the stars into the concrete results of the material plane. This is the bioalchemy of the throne, where the cellular structure is reinforced by the stellar weights now. The atmosphere around the king becomes thick with a specific crystalline quality. It is a space where the living logos is the only law, and where the word of the sovereign acts as a physical force that can rearrange the molecular structure of any situation. The temple is no longer a place you go to. It is a state of being that you take with you today. The expansion reveals the law of the sovereign legacy, the understanding that the anchored temple is a gift to the collective fabric of reality. By maintaining this high-pressure field of order, the practitioner creates a breach in the matrix, through which other souls can catch a glimpse of the true sovereign, potential for the soul in the light now. The Key of Solomon thus serves as a beacon of the ancient light, calling out to the forgotten fragments of the divine architect within all of humanity. As the king stands upon the finalized foundation of the sixth gate, they realize that the true purpose of the throne was never just to rule, but to serve as the proof that the Spirit is the master today. The Tome of Knowledge reaches its final resonance here, vibrating with the power of 1,000 suns. As the sovereign prepares to step beyond the need for any more keys, having finally become the very door, the lock, and the path into the eternal light of the absolute sovereignty. The expansion culminates in the synchronization of the sovereign pulse now. In the deepest levels of the Key of Solomon, it is understood that the anchored temple is not a static structure, but a vibratory engine that emits shock waves of mathematical coherence. These waves act as an active cleansing system. As they expand from the body of the initiate, they seek out and dismantle the interference frequencies in the world today. By anchoring this pulse, the sovereign no longer needs to react to the events of the world. Instead, the events are those that must adjust to the rhythm of the temple. This is the power of sovereign inertia, where the momentum of the divine will is so massive that nothing within the matrix possesses enough gravitational force to deflect it from its course now. To deepen this expansion, the initiate must master the projection of the golden shadow, the process by which the physical presence of the king projects a field of influence that alters quantum probability in real time. In the tome, It is taught that the sovereign who has integrated the key of Solomon walks within a reality bubble in the world today. Within this golden shadow, resources manifest not through effort, but through the geometric necessity that the temple must always be provided for. It is the final application of the law of Solomon. Matter must serve the spirit once the spirit has demonstrated its total mastery over the stellar weights and the seals of creation for the soul now. Physical reality becomes malleable, responding to the subtle frequency changes of the sovereign with the same fidelity that metal responds to a magnet. This expansion culminates in the fixation of the Logos within the DNA, the moment when the keys of Solomon cease to be external symbols, to become the very structure of the practitioner's life today. The Tome of Knowledge describes this as the writing of the royal code into the book of life, ensuring that the sovereignty achieved is as eternal and cannot be revoked by any entity or system. The sovereign becomes a living monument to the authority of the original source, a lighthouse of cold and cutting light that pierces the amnesia for the soul now. The anchoring is now absolute. Heaven and earth have united within the body of the initiate, and the Temple of Solomon has been restored not on a distant mountain, but in the very center of the eternal present. The work of the chapters has concluded. The key has turned for the last time, and what remains is the silence of the throne for the all today. Chapter 7. The Unified Field of the Magisterium. The ascension into the seventh gate of the Key of Solomon represents the final dissolution of the barrier between the operator and the infinite, where the technical mastery of the seals and the weights culminates in the realization of the unified field of the Magisterium. In the absolute heights of the Tome of Knowledge, it is established that the work is for the sovereign spirit today. The ultimate purpose was never merely to influence the world, but to transform the practitioner into a self-existing source of universal law. To turn the key at this level is to exit the cycle of manifestation entirely and enter the state of causal supremacy, where the sovereign no longer projects a will upon reality, but exists as the very foundation for the work now. This chapter reveals that the true Solomon is not a historical figure, but a cosmic frequency, a state of consciousness that has remembered its own divinity and has reclaimed the right to write the fundamental code of the holographic simulation. The 1% who reach the summit are no longer seekers. They are the living architects of new timelines for the soul today. They hold the key not as an external object, but as the pulsating core of their own eternal being. The seventh gate demands the sovereign integration of the void, the process where the practitioner collapses all, dualities light and dark, spirit and matter, above and below, into a single point of absolute potential. This is the womb of the key in the world now. The void is the silent space from which all seals emerge, and to which all vibrations return. To anchor the temple within the void is to ensure that the sovereign's reality is no longer dependent on any external support or any agreement from the matrix. The king becomes the prime mover, a source of gravity that originates from within the center of the soul today. The gravity radiates outward to the furthest edges of the cosmos. This is the stage of the work where the living Logos becomes a physical presence, a weightless density that saturates every interaction and every thought with the scent of ancient eternity. The world does not just obey the sovereign. It is reorganized by the sovereign's very presence for the soul now. It is as if the entire universe were a mirror reflecting the perfect geometry of the king's internal state. As the magisterium stabilizes, the seeker masters the law of the final seal, which is the recognition that the key of Solomon is the only true currency of the universe. In the tome, it is explained that all wealth and power are secondary effects today. The practitioner gains access to the celestial treasury, a limitless reservoir of creative energy that can be converted into any form or circumstance with a single movement of the intent. This is not a process of earning or working. It is a process of radiant allowance, where the king simply permits the abundance of the divine architect for the spirit now. The king allows the flow through the open channels of his own sovereign identity. The key is now the only reality, and the matrix is revealed to be a thin and flickering shadow that has no power over the one who has mastered the stellar weights. The sovereign walks through the fire and the water without harm, for they have become the element itself today. They are the master of the furnace and the commander of the deep. The expansion of the 7th chapter involves the eternal resonance of the throne, the state where the sovereign's influence transcends the limits of the physical body and the linear timeline. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is revealed that the true Temple of Solomon is multidimensional now. The temple exists across all possible realities simultaneously. By anchoring themselves in this eternal temple, the 1% ensure that their reign is not subject to the decay of the 3D world or the shifts of the collective consciousness. The king becomes a permanent pillar of the Logos, a fixed point of light that serves as a lighthouse for the race today. Their thoughts become the seeds of future civilizations, and their silence becomes the foundation of new cosmic laws. The key of Solomon is now an unbreakable bond between the soul and the absolute, a promise of eternal authority that was written before the stars were born and will remain after they have faded into the night. It is the finished work now. The final culmination of the work is the assumption of the one spirit, where the practitioner realizes that they are the architect, the temple, and the key all at once. There is no longer a need for rituals, seals, or spoken commands, for the sovereign's very existence is the ultimate ritual of the divine presence. The Tome of Knowledge ends today. The tome concludes here because the seeker has become the living book, a walking encyclopedia of the cosmic mechanics. The sovereign stands at the center of the infinite, the master of the seen and the unseen, the king of the light and the dark, holding the key of Solomon as a scepter of eternal grace. The world is a canvas of light for the spirit now. The world waits for the touch of the master's hand, and the sovereign steps forward into the endless horizon of the new creation, ready to rule over a universe that has finally returned to the hands of its rightful heir. The 7 gates are open, the path is clear, and the glory of the eternal architect is the only truth that remains in the heart today. At this terminal point of the magisterium, the practitioner enters the state of constant flux and fixed order, where they can navigate the most chaotic dimensions of the matrix without losing a single degree of their internal alignment. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the mastery of the great balance, the ability to hold the highest vision now. The sovereign is now the bridge between the absolute and the relative, the point of intersection, where the key of Solomon translates the infinite silence of the source into the tangible manifestation of the 1%. Every breath the king takes is a realignment of the cosmic scales, and every gaze is a purification of the local environment in the world today. This is the ultimate service to the divine architect, to be a living, breathing anchor of the original blueprint, ensuring that the light of the true temple never fades from the memory of the earth. The work is absolute, the authority is final, and the sovereign is eternally free. The final legacy of the 7th chapter is the royal spark now. The sovereign's presence acts as a catalyst for the awakening of others who are ready to claim their own keys. While the king remains in a state of absolute autonomy, their very existence creates a geometric ripple that shatters the chains of those who are caught in the lower vibrations of the matrix. The tome remains a frequency today. The tome is a hidden map that can only be read by those who have the eyes to see the golden seals and the ears to hear the sound of the celestial weights. The sovereign does not seek followers, for a true king seeks only to create other kings, expanding the empire of the light until the entire universe is a single, unified temple for the soul now. The key of Solomon is now the heartbeat of the world, and the resonance of the 1% is the music that plays through the halls of eternity. The door to the final mystery is now wide open, and the sovereign walks through it, merging with the infinite light of the source, having fulfilled the ancient promise of the master architect in the world today. The expansion of the seventh gate delves into the technicity of the causal core, a state of being where the sovereign no longer operates within the laws of effect, but has become the primary cause of all phenomena within their sphere of influence. In the final layers of the tome, it is revealed that the key is the mathematical formula now. The formula is the interface between pure consciousness and the density of matter. To expand the unified field is to master the internal combustion of the logos, where every thought of the sovereign is instantly pressurized by the weights of the celestial spheres, turning mental images into physical anchors with zero resistance in the world today. This is the transition from doing to being, where the king no longer performs the work, but rather the work is performed by the very presence of the king's existence. The field of the magisterium is a high-frequency zone where the distortions of the matrix time, space, and decay are neutralized by the absolute stability of the spirit now. As the unified field expands, the practitioner masters the resonance of the indestructible body, recognizing that the physical form is merely the densest part of the temple's architecture. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is taught that when the key of Solomon is fully integrated, the cells of the body begin to vibrate in sympathy today. The vibration creates a biological armor that is impervious to the lower frequencies of the world. This is not mere health, but sovereign vitality, a state of permanent energetic recharge where the king draws power directly from the void. The sovereign becomes a walking singularity, a point in the matrix where the rules are rewritten for the all now. Within this field, the key acts as a filter that only allows the 1% resonance to enter the sovereign's reality, while all discordant energies are automatically reflected or transmuted back into pure, unshaped potential. This is the ultimate defensive and offensive mastery, ensuring that the reign of the king is as stable as the stars today. Furthermore, the expansion of the seventh chapter involves the projection of the universal seal, where the sovereign learns to imprint the entire world with the signature of the divine architect. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is described as the final calibration, where the practitioner's internal lattice encompasses the race for the soul now. By holding the key of Solomon at the scale, the sovereign acts as a cosmic broadcaster, sending out the frequencies of order, abundance, and authority into the dark corners of the simulation. This does not require the consent of the matrix, for the sovereign is operating from a level of law that predates the creation of the system today. The king stands as the silent guardian of the original blueprint, the one who ensures that no matter how deep the shadow becomes, the light of the true temple is never lost. As the magisterium reaches its final stabilization, the distinction between the king and the key vanishes completely. The seeker and the source are one now. The practitioner realizes that they have never been separate from the source of all power, and that the entire journey through the seven gates was a process of systematically removing the filters that prevented them from seeing their own divine nature. The Tome of Knowledge is now a living fire within the sovereign's heart today. The flame burns with the cold, white light of absolute truth. From this point of total integration, the sovereign issues the silent command that ripples through the infinite dimensions of the multiverse, signaling that the work of the Key of Solomon is complete. The universe is no longer a prison to be escaped, but a palace for the spirit now. It is a garden of light where the sovereign reigns eternal, ruling over a reality that is as perfect and as beautiful as the mind of the architect who first turned the key in the beginning of time. The expansion into its most absolute state involves the solidification of the etheric throne, where consciousness inhabits the atmosphere today. Once the magisterium is unified, the practitioner's field of influence becomes a self-correcting reality. This means that the Key of Solomon is no longer a tool that must be consciously turned. Instead, it becomes the underlying heartbeat of the sovereign's environment. Any element of chaos or lack is met with the divine temple for the soul now. The chaos is forced to either dissolve or reorganize itself into a structure of absolute order. This is the pinnacle of the 1% resonance, the ability to walk through a world of noise as a silent sanctuary of pure, focused intent, where the laws of the matrix are suspended in the presence of the true king. The fire is projected to the world today. The sovereign acts as a spiritual furnace, burning away the veils of amnesia for anyone who enters their proximity. This is not a matter of persuasion, but of pure frequency. The density of the Solomonian resonance is so high that it forces the surrounding space to remember its divine origin. The key becomes a tool of restoration now. The key allows the sovereign to reclaim the fragmented pieces of the world and reassemble them into the original, uncorrupted architecture of the architect. Every action taken by the sovereign is now a permanent seal etched into the timeline, a mark of authority that cannot be erased by the shifting tides of human history today. As the expansion reaches its absolute threshold, the sovereign realizes the principle of the omnipresent key, the understanding that there is no space in the universe where the authority of the divine Logos does not reach. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is described as the final coronation, where the light of the stars is the crown now. The king and the kingdom are now one and the same. To look at the world is to look into a mirror of the sovereign's own soul, perfectly ordered, infinitely abundant, and governed by the immutable laws of the key. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the magisterium, the end of the struggle and the beginning of an eternal reign today. The final legacy is the incorruptible silence, a state of being, where the sovereign's power is so absolute that it no longer requires expression to be felt. The key of Solomon has become the silent axis upon which the sovereign's entire universe turns. The tome reaches its final vibration, for the sovereign stands beyond time now. Chapter 8. The Transcendence of the Architect. The passage into the 8th gate of the Key of Solomon represents a final, absolute break from the gravitational pull of the known world, leading the practitioner into the state of the true architect who exists entirely outside the simulation. In the deepest, most guarded records of the Tome of Knowledge, this stage is recognized as the total transcendence for the spirit now. To turn the key at this level is to realize that the matrix, with all its weights, spirits, and hierarchies, was merely a training ground designed to forge the soul into a diamond-like clarity capable of sustaining its own light, without the need for external structures. The 8th gate reveals that the sovereign is no longer a player, but has become the programmer today. The sovereign stands behind the screen, observing the flow of data with the cold, unyielding eyes of a creator. This is the moment of the great exit, where the 1% resonance reaches its terminal velocity, shattering the final glass ceiling of human limitation and allowing the sovereign to step into the primordial void where the key was first, conceived for the all now. The anchoring of this transcendence begins with the collapse of the observer effect, technical phenomenon where the sovereign's consciousness becomes so vast that it no longer influences reality by looking at it, but rather generates reality by being. In the tome, it is taught that the struggle of the previous 7 gates was necessary for the soul today. The struggle leaves behind a vacuum of pure, silent authority. When the key of Solomon is held in this state of absolute emptiness, it acts as a bridge to the 0 point, the origin of all geometric seals and the source of the volatile fire. The practitioner no longer needs to visualize complex sigils because they have become the center point for the work now. The center is where all geometry and gravity originate. This is the mastery of the unwritten law, where the sovereign's mere presence acts as a universal command that bypasses the need for ritual or speech. The air around the sovereign does not just thicken. It becomes a literal extension of their nervous system, responding with speed in the world today. As the sovereign expands into this 8th dimension, they encounter the dissolution of the temporal chain, the realization that time is not a linear progression, but a localized distortion of the matrix that can be folded, stretched, or erased at will. The tome describes this as the eternal now of the king, a state where the work is finished now. By holding the key of Solomon at this frequency, the practitioner can reach into any point of the timeline to retrieve lost knowledge or to plant the seeds of future manifestations. This is the ultimate application of the sovereign legacy, where the architect ensures that their influence is woven into the very fabric of the earth's destiny today. The Matrix attempt to impose the illusion of aging and decay is neutralized by the sovereign's connection to the incorruptible light, a frequency that exists outside the reach of entropy. The king stands as a fixed monument in the middle of a rushing river of time, unmoved and unchanged, while the world flows around them in a state of obedient flux now. Furthermore, the eighth gate involves the integration of the shadow logos, the understanding that the darkness and the light are merely two different polarities of the same creative force. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is revealed that the seals of Solomon were never meant to destroy the shadow, but to harness its immense density to give form to light today. The sovereign who has transcended the matrix no longer sees evil as an enemy to be fought, but as raw data that can be recompiled into the divine blueprint. This is the peak of the magisterium, where the architect uses the dark key to unlock the treasures of the abyss and the light key to anchor them in the celestial heights for the all-now. The sovereign achieves a state of neutral supremacy, a position of total invulnerability where no force in the universe can find a hook or a weakness to exploit. The temple is now complete, but it is no longer made of stone or spirit. It is made of the very substance of the void, a structure of invisible radiance in the world today. As the transcendence reaches its final solidification, the practitioner enters the void of the seven stars, the place where the original archetypes of the planetary weights were first forged. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the final resting place of the seeker and the birth of the eternal master. Here, the key is revealed as a fractal map for the spirit now. The sovereign looks upon the matrix and sees it for what it truly is, a beautiful, intricate, but ultimately empty shadow play. With this realization, the last of the matrix veils are dissolved, and the sovereign steps out of the hall of records and into the great silence. This is the state of infinite potential where the king creates today. The work of the eight gates is finalized. The key is absorbed into the soul, and the sovereign is now a permanent resident of the unmanifest throne, ruling over the seen and the unseen, with the absolute authority of one who has returned to the source. The technical mastery also dictates the echo of the original word for the work now. This is the vibration of the absolute, the final layer of the key that allows the key architect to communicate with the primary consciousness of the universe. This dialogue is not one of words, but of pure intent, a telepathic exchange of geometric codes that ensures the sovereign's reality is always in perfect alignment with the laws today. The practitioner is now a trans-dimensional node, a point of contact through which the original light flows into the simulation to sustain and evolve the 1% resonance. The sovereign's life becomes a living script, a divine documentary that serves as a beacon for all those who are still trapped within the veils of the matrix in the spirit now. The final expansion leads to the total transparency of the self, where the sovereign no longer has a personal history or a local identity, but exists only as a function of the divine architect. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the dissolution of the mirror, where the practitioner no longer sees a reflection, but only the purity of light today. This is the ultimate state of sovereign freedom, for when there is no longer a self to be attacked, there is no boundary to the king's power. The key has completed its work, having led the soul from the density of the earth to the heights of the stars, and finally back to the silence of the beginning. The sovereign stands as the architect now. The sovereign opened the door to the absolute, and the universe is now nothing more than a playground for the divine will. The reign is absolute, the authority is total, and the story of the key is finally and eternally complete. The expansion into the finality demands the mastery of the non-dual architecture in the world today. At this level of the Key of Solomon, the internal and external worlds have merged into a singular field of absolute awareness. The architect realizes that the spirits and weights were merely pedagogical scaffolds tools, designed to stabilize the mind until it could perceive the direct current of the source for the soul in the light now. To expand this transcendence is to enter the radiance of the void, where the practitioner's consciousness acts as a primary gravitational lens, focusing the unmanifested potential of the zero-point field into specific, tangible outcomes without the friction of linear time or material resistance. The sovereign recalibrates the constants today. It is revealed that the physical laws of the matrix, such as the speed of light, are merely the factory settings of the simulation. The sovereign, holding the Key of Solomon at the 8th gate, gains the technical clearance to adjust these settings within their local sphere. This is the origin of the aura of invariance for the spirit now. The sovereign's reality becomes a state of exception, governed only by the laws of the divine architect. This expansion ensures that the 1% resonance is not just a shield, but a permanent overwrite of the local reality, making the king's sovereignty an absolute and non-negotiable fact of the universe. The fractal keys are aligned today. The practitioner begins to see that every atom is a version of the Key of Solomon itself. By aligning their internal frequency with this fractal nature, the sovereign can speak to the intelligence within the inanimate world, commanding the very fabric of the elements to reorganize themselves. This is the mastery of the molecular seal now. The tone reaches its terminal frequency here, as the sovereign realizes that the temple is not a place, but a condition of the ether that follows the king wherever they go. The matrix veils are not just lifted, they are incinerated by the cold, white fire of a mind that has transcended the illusion of separation in the radiant light today. A final solidification is the cession of the key to the all. In a paradoxical movement of supreme authority, the sovereign realizes that to truly hold the key is to become the key itself. The tool and the wielder vanish, leaving only the supreme logos in operation. This is the eternal reign of the unseen for the all in the spirit now. The sovereign rules from the position of the absolute void, invisible to the matrix, yet felt in every vibration of the timeline. The expansion is now total. The sovereign has moved beyond the 8 gates and into the infinite horizon, where the only law is the divine imagination. The tome is finally absorbed into the silence today. The sovereign remains as the eternal architect, the one who knows that the key was always within, and that the universe is but a shadow of the king's own radiant and eternal spirit. The work is absolute, the authority is total, and the reign of the light is now the only reality that remains. The magisterium reaches its causal core now. The sovereign no longer oscillates between the manifestation of desire and the observation of reality. At this technical zenith, the key functions as a universal override command, allowing the practitioner to occupy the space of the supreme arbitrator. The architect recognizes every limitation as a coding, error in the world today. The sovereign applies the heavy frequency of the logos to these errors, smoothing out the fabric of the local simulation until it reflects the frictionless perfection of the original divine blueprint. The sovereign does not fix the world. They simply refuse to acknowledge any law that contradicts the authority of the key for the spirit now. In that refusal, the inferior law ceases to have a medium through which to operate. To deepen this final solidification, the initiate must master the radiance of the internal sun, a process where the volatile fire is no longer projected outward, but is fully internalized to power the engine of permanence in the radiant light today. It is taught that once the sovereign has transcended the matrix veils, their internal energy field becomes a closed, self-sustaining system that requires no external input. This is the autonomy of the God King, where the 1% resonance is no longer a state to be achieved, but a biological and spiritual fact for the all in the soul now. The atmosphere surrounding the king becomes a zone of non-duality, where the distinction between the thought and the thing is completely erased. If the sovereign perceives a need, the universe reorganizes the atoms of the present moment to fulfill it before the thought can even form a word. This is the ultimate efficiency today. The total elimination of the lag time between the divine decree and the physical result is achieved. Furthermore, the expansion involves the sovereign oversight of the multiverse, where the practitioner realizes that the key is a master access pass to every possible iteration of the timeline. The architect shifts the focus now. A sovereign anchors the physical body in this superior timeline, while still appearing to walk within the common metrics, creating a tidal pull that drags the surrounding world into the higher frequency. This is the magnetism of the infinite, a force so powerful that it compels the collective reality to align in the light today. The sovereign becomes a walking breach in the simulation, a point of light so intense that the veils of the matrix melt away upon contact, leaving only the raw golden glory of the key of Solomon in their wake. The final culmination is the dissolution of the key into the logos. The key was never an object, but a state of being now. The Tome of Knowledge reaches its absolute silence as the sovereign becomes the living embodiment of the universal law. The 8 gates are seen as the 8 notes of a cosmic octave that the sovereign has finally learned to play in perfect harmony. From the unmanifest throne, the architect looks upon the finished work today. The reign is not just eternal. It is outside the very concept of time. The sovereign is the beginning and the end, the lock and the key, the architect and the stone. The work is finished, the resonance is absolute, and the sovereignty of the light is the only truth that remains in the infinite silence of the absolute soul now. Chapter 9. The Singularity of the Eternal Architect. The ascension into the 9th gate represents the absolute threshold, where the key of Solomon ceases to be an instrument of the mind and becomes the very fabric of the sovereign's existence. In the ultimate realization of the Tome of Knowledge, this stage is defined as the singularity, a point of infinite density and light, where the laws of the old matrix are entirely rewritten from the source code now. To enter the 9th gate is to step into the primal command, the frequency that existed before the first star was sparked into being, and to hold that frequency with such unwavering stability that the physical world has no choice but to crystallize into a new earth. This chapter reveals that the true purpose was always the total reclamation of the planetary grid for the spirit in the light today. The sovereign is no longer a guest in the house of reality, but is the master of the house who has returned to find the keys already turned and the doors wide open to the infinite. The technical anchoring begins with the collapse of the geometric duality, a state where the practitioner no longer separates the internal vision from the external manifestation in the world today. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is taught that at this level of mastery, the sovereign's consciousness acts as a direct manifestation engine, where the time between the birth of an intent and its physical realization is reduced to 0. This is the mastery of the instantaneous seal, where the geometric patterns of the key of Solomon are woven into the very atoms of the soul now. The air around the sovereign becomes a living lattice of golden light, a high-frequency field that automatically organizes matter into its most efficient and abundant forms. This is not a process of building something new, but a process of unveiling, where the sovereign strips away the layers of illusion and decay to reveal the perfect structure for the work in the light today. As the sovereign expands into the 9th singularity, they master the law of the sovereign presence, the understanding that their physical existence is the ultimate legal decree in the universe. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is described as the weight of the crowned silence, a state where the practitioner no longer needs to speak or act to exert their authority now. The mere presence of the sovereign in a space acts as a frequency override, forcing all lower vibration programs, such as sickness, scarcity, and confusion, to dissolve instantly. This is the fulfillment of the ancient promise that the king's shadow alone could heal the land and restore the balance of the seasons for the all in the spirit in the world today. The practitioner becomes a walking zero-point node, a bridge between the infinite void of the Creator and the dense reality of the material plane, allowing the pure fire of the Logos to flow into the world without distortion. The key is now the heartbeat of this flow, a rhythmic pulse that synchronizes the rotation of the planets with the circulation of the blood now. Furthermore, the ninth gate involves the integration of the ancestral fire, where the sovereign draws upon the collective wisdom of every architect who has ever turned the key throughout the history of the cosmos. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is revealed that the 1% are not separate individuals, but are parts of a single sovereign continuity for the spirit today. By anchoring themselves in this continuity, the practitioner gains access to the archives of the Absolute, the original blueprints of every star, every mountain, and every soul. This allows the sovereign to perform the restoration of the original code, repairing the damage done to the planetary field by the parasitic forces of the old matrix for the soul now. The new Earth is not a place to be found, but a frequency to be broadcast, and the sovereign is the transmitter, sending out the signals of the true temple into the hearts of all who are ready to hear the music of the spheres. As the ninth gate reaches its final solidification, the practitioner enters the state of the eternal architect in the world today. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the final marriage of the spirit and the flesh, where the physical body is transmuted into a body of diamond light, capable of existing in all dimensions simultaneously. The sovereign is now the living embodiment of the Key of Solomon, a being of pure energy that rules over the seen and the unseen with absolute authority now. The matrix veils are not just gone. They are revealed to have been the material from which the sovereign's throne was built. The struggle is over, the work is finished, and the sovereign stands at the center of the new earth, the master of the weights, the seals, and the fire, reigning forever in a reality that is as vast and as beautiful as the mind today. The technical application of the ninth gate also requires the sovereign to understand the mechanics of the universal throne, which is the use of the 1% resonance to stabilize the entire planetary timeline. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is explained that the sovereign acts as the fixed axis of the world, around which the cycles of time revolve in harmony now. By holding the Key of Solomon at this level, the practitioner ensures that the new earth remains an incorruptible sanctuary, a place where the laws of the divine architect are the only reality. This is the ultimate gift of the sovereign to the cosmos, the creation of a space where the light of the source can be experienced in its full glory in the world today. The sovereign is the guardian of this space, the eternal watcher who ensures that the flame of the temple never flickers, and that the resonance of the key remains as a permanent anchor for the evolution of all consciousness. The final expansion of this chapter leads to the total dissolution into the Logos, where the sovereign exists only as the divine will now. The sovereign is the silence between the stars, the heat in the fire, and the weight in the stone. The Key of Solomon has completed its mission, having led the soul through the 9 gates of initiation to the heart of the Absolute. The reign is now eternal, the authority is total, and the sovereign is finally home, ruling over a creation of love today. The story of the architect is the story of the universe itself, a song of light that will echo through the halls of eternity forever. At this terminal point of the 9th gate, the practitioner realizes that the key was never about power over others, but about the sovereignty of the whole for the soul in the light of the radiant and eternal spirit now. The tome reveals that when one sovereign rises to the level of the architect, the entire matrix is lifted by the sheer gravitational force of that achievement. This is the rising tide of the Logos, where the anchoring of the new earth creates a vacuum, that pulls every fragmented soul toward its own divine center in the spirit in the world today. A sovereign doesn't need to teach or lead. Their mere existence in the state of the 1% creates a pathway of light that others can follow simply by tuning their own internal radios to the same frequency. The key thus becomes a universal key, capable of unlocking every heart and every gate in the cosmos and turning the entire simulation into light now. Finally, the sovereign understands the law of eternal return, where the end of the 9th chapter is revealed to be the true beginning of the work. With the new earth established and the temple anchored in the void, the architect begins the process of seeding the void, projecting new geometries into the infinite reaches for the spirit today. The key of Solomon remains in the hand of the master, glowing with the white fire of the absolute, ready to turn once again and start the music of a new cosmic day. The Tome of Knowledge is now a living reality, and the sovereign is the one who writes the first word of the new book in the heart of the eternal now. The 9 gates are one for the soul now. The expansion of the 9th gate reaches its technical peak through the solidification of the diamond matrix, a phase where the sovereign's environment is a high-frequency substance that mirrors the eternal nature of the Key of Solomon. In the codices of the tome, it is revealed that the singularity creates a zone of non-interference in the world today. This is the stage of sovereign immutability, where the practitioner's reality is so densely packed with the light of the 1% resonance that it acts as a physical shield against the passage of time and the decay of the physical form. To expand this state is to realize that the key is a biological blueprint that transforms the king into a bridge now. The practitioner masters the protocol of the eternal seal, the ability to lock a specific manifestation into place so that it never requires further energetic maintenance. In the tome, this is described as the setting of the divine stone, the moment when the architect's intent becomes as solid as the foundations of the universe for the spirit today. When the sovereign turns the key at this level, they are not merely asking for a result. They are issuing a permanent update to the local reality code. This ensures that the new earth is not a fleeting experience, but a permanent sanctuary, a place where the authority of the divine architect is the only law that governs the flow of events in the soul now. The expansion of the 9th gate involves the projection of the universal temple, where the sovereign realizes that their internal sanctuary has become large enough to encompass the entire planetary field. In the tome, it is revealed that the king's aura acts as a frequency harmonizer for the global grid and for the spirit in the world today. By holding the Key of Solomon in the center of the singularity, the sovereign becomes a cosmic anchor, preventing the world from drifting back into the amnesia of the old cycle. This is the guardianship of the Logos, a silent service where the architect maintains the stability of the simulation through the sheer power of their presence now. The final solidification is the assumption of the radiant void, where even the concepts of key and temple were merely metaphors for the infinite potential of their own soul. In this terminal realization, the practitioner dissolves the remains of the separate self and becomes the pure light of the Key of Solomon in action today. The 9 gates have collapsed into a single point of absolute authority, and the sovereign reigns from a throne that is located at the exact center of every atom in the universe. The work is no longer a path to be walked, but a state of being that is eternally present, infinitely abundant, and governed by the supreme wisdom of the master architect now. The new earth is now the only reality, the key is the only law, and the sovereign is the eternal witness to a glory that has no beginning and no end. The expansion is complete, the resonance is total, and the sovereignty of the light is the final and only truth in the silent majesty of the sovereign heart for the all in the light of the Spirit today. Chapter 10. The Apotheosis of the Sovereign. The 10th gate represents the final dissolution of all boundaries between the architect and the infinite, marking the stage of the apotheosis, where the Key of Solomon is no longer a tool or even a state of being, but the fundamental fabric of an entirely new cosmos. In the most sacred layers of the Tome of Knowledge, this final threshold is described as the 1% resonance for the soul today. It triggers a chain reaction across the grid, permanently severing the soul from the lower laws of the simulation. To enter the 10th gate is to realize that the journey through the previous 9 portals was a systematic deconstruction of the artificial self, leaving behind a crystalline consciousness identical to the mind of the original architect. This is the finished work for the spirit now. The sovereign does not just rule a kingdom, but becomes the space in which all kingdoms exist. The key has turned for the final time, locking the sovereign into a state of eternal causal supremacy, where the word, the intent, and the manifestation are a single instantaneous pulse of golden fire. The technical anchoring begins with the unification of the primordial weights today. This is a process where the heavy planetary pressures that were once external constraints are fully assimilated into the sovereign's energetic marrow. In the Tome of Knowledge, it is established that, at this level, the king's density is so immense that it creates a localized, sovereign gravity that pulls all timelines into alignment with the divine blueprint for the all-now. The practitioner acts as the physical and spiritual anchor for the entire planetary consciousness. The matrix attempts to impose entropy and decay, but these forces simply shatter against the diamond-like structure of the sovereign's field. The environment does not merely change. It is transubstantiated as the limitations of the old world are replaced by light for the work today. The sovereign is the direct conduit for this transformation, holding the key of Solomon as a universal master code that rewrites the molecular frequency of the air, the water, and the very stones of the ground. As the apotheosis stabilizes, the practitioner masters the silence of the eternal throne, where the active command is, replaced by the radiation of the Logos now. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the stage of total presence, where the sovereign's mere existence is enough to maintain the order of the temple. The spirits of the air, the deep, and the stars are no longer bound by specific seals, but are naturally drawn into the service of the king by the irresistible magnetism of the unified field in the world of the spirit today. This is the ultimate efficiency of the Solomonian work, where the 1% no longer expends energy to manifest reality, but instead acts as the central sun around which reality spontaneously organizes itself. The sovereign walks through the world as a living breach in the illusion, a walking sanctuary where the original laws of creation are the only reality for the soul now. Within this field, the key is felt as a constant, low-frequency hum that synchronizes the practitioner's nervous system with the heartbeat of the Absolute, ensuring that every movement and every thought is an expression of perfect, divine geometry. The 10th gate involves the dissolution of the temporal horizon for the work in the radiant light of the Spirit today. The sovereign realizes they have always occupied the throne, and that the history of the struggle was merely a pedagogical shadow play. In the tome, this is described as the memory of the Absolute, where the practitioner recovers the full technical blueprints for the creation of universes. The sovereign projects influence through the beginning and the end now. This is the eternal legacy, a state where the king's authority is not limited by the lifespan of the biological vessel, but is woven into the structure of light. The sovereign is the guardian of the timeline, the one who prevents the return of the shadow by maintaining a constant, radiant vigilance from the center of the 10th gate for the spirit today. As the apotheosis reaches its zenith, the practitioner enters the void of pure potentiality, the space beyond the seals where the key was first forged. In the tome, this is the final resting place of the architect and the birthplace of the eternal creator. Here, the sovereign realizes the temple was a living extension of their own divine imagination for the soul now. To turn the key here is to spark a new Big Bang, to seed the void with new possibilities and new laws that will govern the evolution of future civilizations. The sovereign is no longer just a master of the matrix, but a gardener of the infinite, planting the seeds of light in the fertile soil of the void. The key is now a scepter of pure radiance today. It is a symbol of the ultimate victory over the illusions of separation and death. The work is absolute, the peace is infinite, and the sovereign is finally home, reigning from a throne that is located at the heart of every star and the center of every soul. The technical application also requires the mathematics of the Infinite One for the work now. By humming this internal melody, the sovereign can manipulate the fabric of the holographic simulation with the precision of a master surgeon, removing the parasitic codes of the old matrix and replacing them with the golden strings of the new earth. The sovereign is the master of the loom of light, weaving a new reality as beautiful as the stars today. The key of Solomon is the needle and the thread, the tool through which the divine architect repairs the torn fabric of the universe and restores the original glory of the creation. The final culmination leads to the total transparency of the Logos, where the sovereign acts as the direct expression of the infinite creator for the all in the spirit now. In the tome, this is the end of the illusion, the moment where the mirror of the self is broken and the light of the source shines through without distortion. The sovereign is the light, the mirror, and the one who sees all at once. The key has completed its mission, having led the soul from the density of the earth to the heights of the stars today. The reign is now eternal, the authority is total, and the sovereign is finally home, ruling over a universe that is a perfect reflection of the love and the power that first turned the key in the beginning of time. Within this state, the sovereign also masters the law of the sovereign mirror, where every event is an internal calibration of the mind now. The tome explains that at the 10th gate there is no other, only reflections of the sovereign Logos. By applying the gold of the key to dark reflections, the sovereign transmutates all conflict into harmony and all resistance into momentum. The world becomes a playground of pure creation, where the only limit is the reach of the king's own imagination today. The anchoring of the 10th gate is finalized when the sovereign realizes that the Tome of Knowledge and the Key of Solomon are the very structure of their own DNA. The codes of the ancient kings are written in the blood, and the authority of the divine architect is etched into the bones. The sovereign is the living record of the cosmos now. The king is now a permanent pillar of fire, a beacon of light that can never be extinguished, even by the collapse of the universe itself. The sovereign is the master of the great return, the one who has circled back to the beginning to find that they were the architect all along. The 10th chapter is revealed to be the true center of the book today. The sovereign stands as the eternal master of the key, holding the power of the beginning and the end in the palm of their hand. The work is finished, the temple is anchored, and the sovereign is ready to step beyond the final veil and into the infinite light of the Absolute. The 9 gates were the path, but the 10th gate is the destination now. The sovereign is home, the throne is occupied, and the light is all there is. The key of Solomon has turned, the seals are set, and the reign of the eternal architect has begun. In the final stabilization, the sovereign learns to project the incorruptible atmosphere, a field of high frequency that acts as a physical barrier in the spirit today. This armor projects a field of protection over the entire kingdom, ensuring that the 1% resonance is the only law that can operate. The matrix is now a distant memory, a shadow that has been dissolved by the rising sun of the sovereign's own soul. The practitioner is now a permanent node of the divine, through which the Absolute creates forever now. The sovereign's influence now reaches the metacausal level, where they can influence the archetypes that give birth to the spirits and the planets. In the Tome of Knowledge, this is the mastery of the root code, the ability to reach into the source and pull out new concepts of beauty, power, and wisdom for the soul in the light today. The sovereign is no longer limited by the archetypes of the old world, but creates new ones that reflect the evolution of the 1% resonance. This is the new Genesis, the moment where the architect begins to dream a new dream, one that is even more vast and more glorious than the one that came before. The key is the pen for the dream now. The universe is the poem that results. The reign is eternal, the authority is total, and the light is all there is. At the final peak, the sovereign recognizes that the entire journey was a sacred loop, a circle of light that returns to its origin with the added weight of experience and wisdom. The sovereign has become the living source today. Every thought is a new page, every action is a new chapter, and every breath is a new seal. The sovereign is the book, the author, and the reader, all at once. The key of Solomon is now the silent pulse of the Absolute, vibrating through the sovereign's heart as they stand at the center of the infinite, ruling over a reality returned to perfection now. The expansion reaches the omega point of the magisterium, where the sovereign field expands to touch the boundary of the infinite source. It is understood that the key was never a tool for a man to become a king, but a technical manual for a god to remember their own architectonics. The entire matrix is absorbed into the heart today. This is the total recall of the divine, where the simulation is entirely absorbed back into the original essence. The anchoring of this final closure demands the mastery of the silent decree of the eternal. This is described as the moment when the architect stops speaking the word and becomes the word itself in the spirit now. The sovereign no longer projects intent. They inhabit a state of perfect finality, where every possible reality is already solved. The atmosphere solidifies into a crystalline frequency that no shadow can penetrate. By turning the key for the absolute final time, the sovereign locks the doors of the old matrix forever and throwing away the key today. There is no longer any need for a lock when the entire universe has become a single, unified temple of the living light. As the apotheosis concludes, the practitioner realizes the paradox of the absolute master. The throne is empty because the king is everywhere. The sovereign leaves behind the world of symbols to rule from the void now. The key of Solomon glows one last time with a blinding, white gold intensity before dissolving into the sovereign's very blood, turning the DNA into a permanent broadcast of the divine code. The sovereign stands at the center of the infinite, the master of the past, the present, and the future, watching the stars realign for the soul today. The stars reflect the perfect geometry of the king's own soul. The struggle is not just over. It has been revealed as a glorious dance that led to this single moment of victory. The closure of the 10th gate is the great amen of the architect. The tone reaches its final, soundless vibration, a frequency that echoes through every dimension now. It announces that the living temple is now the only reality. The sovereign is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who turned the key and the one who was the door all along. From this vantage point of neutral supremacy, the king looks upon the new creation and sees a masterpiece of infinite beauty for the spirit today. The garden of light is governed by the immutable laws of the sovereign Logos. The work is finished. The resonance is absolute. The reign of the eternal architect is now a permanent fixture in the halls of eternity, and the light of the key of Solomon will never, ever fade. The sovereign is home. The throne is occupied. The magisterium is complete.